It was the dawn of the 14th century. On the Anatolian plateau in what is now modern-day Turkey, nomadic tribes of Muslim Turks enjoyed a pastoral existence, breeding livestock, cultivating crops, and following the seasons with their families and their herds. But now their native lands were under siege. Barbaric hordes of Mongol horsemen were advancing from the east. Known for their swift and ruthless raids, these Mongol warriors had created a 13th century empire that stretched from Europe's eastern edge to the Pacific. Threatening on the west were Christian armies from the once great but now weakened Byzantine Empire. With their land and their way of life endangered from two sides, one man emerged as the tribe's leader. His name was Osman. He was tall, with a dark complexion and hazel eyes. He was known as a brilliant rider and swordsman.
Osmanlı Devleti'ni kuran Osman Gazi'nin etrafında
Osman was the founder of the Ottoman Empire. He surrounded himself with strong and brave soldiers, reckless men who were superior riders and could fire their arrows on the move. They were skilled in ancient Turkish Anatolian warrior tricks, ambushes, and hit and run tactics.
In the spring of 1302, fate smiled on Osman and his followers. Unusually heavy spring rains in the Saqqara Valley, in what is now northwest Turkey, flooded the valley floor and changed. It gave Osman and his warriors an opening to attack.
Byzantium was in a very bad way. There was, let us say, a vacuum in northwest Anatolia, a vacuum of power, and into it they went.
Horsemen, very often from among rival Turkish principalities who wanted to fight against the infidel, but also attacking and capturing rich Byzantine towns meant more booty and spoil that were distributed among the warriors.
Yiğitlerim, bu ganimetler hepiniz için. Gel yiğidim. Gel yiğidim.
Many of the early Ottomans were Christians. They joined Osman in a common endeavor, and that was an endeavor, I think, in the very earliest stages, to enrich themselves largely by the booty and slaves one got from warfare.
Osman's principality, a small strip of land about the size of Manhattan, was born. By 1307, his fighting force, which began with less than 400 soldiers, numbered over 4,000. His followers became known as Osmanlis. Western languages translated the word as Ottomans. Osman's power grew not just from the force of his personality, but also from the belief in his divine right to lead. Osman and his followers were Sufis, members of a mystical sect of Islam that was popular on the frontier because it didn't require praying in mosques or reading from the Quran. Some Sufis worshipped in part through dance. Practitioners were known as whirling dervishes.
Although we call it a dance, it's not really a dance. It's a practice for that individual to forget himself, to...
By the time of his death in 1324, Osman had fathered an enduring dynasty. His son Orhan would build on that legacy, creating a powerful Muslim army that would soon be knocking on Europe's door. In 1324, Orhan replaced his father Osman as the leader of the Ottomans. Villages. He had bigger and more well-defended targets in mind, and new tactics were required.
The first real city they take is the city of Bursa, and we know that they took it by building.
Acquired knowledge about architecture, they acquired knowledge about decorative styles, they acquired knowledge about how to live in an urban environment.
Orhan established a monetary system and issued coins. He opened schools and built both a mosque and a monument to his father Osman. A regional power with control of trade routes, the Ottomans were a force to be reckoned with.
The Ottomans managed to take some of the fortified towns of Byzantium that gave them more prestige and attracted more warriors to their camps.
At the same time, in the neighboring Byzantine Empire, a continuing conflict between Emperor John Cantacuzene and a rival faction had erupted into civil war. The Byzantine... In the early 1350s, under the guise of helping Cantacuzene, Orhan ordered 6,000 of his troops across the Dardanelles. With no opposition, his troops laid waste to the region. Over the next 16 years, Orhan continued to expand his territory and consolidate his power. In just 60 years, the Ottomans had risen from a tribe of nomads to become rulers of more than...
Philosophical commitment to something that we would call tolerance today, but for reasons of state. It was easier to
But for Murad, new Christian subjects offered a greater opportunity. He devised a plan to create a fierce and loyal cadre of troops. Ottoman officials descended on towns in Christian territories, ordering young boys of the village to come forth for inspection.
The villagers would display their youth, and the Janissary officer would go from one to the other. Height, weight, proportions. The officer would select the ones he thought would be best and took them with him.
Those selected became conscripts in Europe's first standing army, an army that would transform the continent's military landscape. They were known as new troops, or Janissaries. At first, panic spread throughout Balkan Christian communities when the Janissary recruiting officers arrived.
It was a process which entailed these children being dragged, literally dragged and forced out of their families.
Families begged local priests to delete their sons' names from parish registers. Some parents arranged marriages for sons as young as 12 to take advantage of the marriage exemption.
Who did not forget where they came from.
New recruits were brought to the Ottoman capital and converted to Islam.
Allah, Allah, eyvallah. Allah, Allah, eyvallah.
They underwent intense physical training and were drilled in the arts of war.
The training of the Janissaries was very thorough and, to a certain extent, ruthless. There was a physical training, weightlifting and wrestling. They practiced the various formations. There was archery practice regularly twice a week.
When their military training was complete, they were tattooed with a number and a symbol. Murad's revolutionary concept gave him firm control over all his inherited and conquered lands, and turned the Ottoman state into a true empire, reaching deep into Europe. In 1389, Murad was 70 years old and still leading his troops into battle. When he turned his eyes to Constantinople.
Constantinople was a mythic place for the Ottomans. Constantinople represented imperial power, global success.
Sultan Mehmet, gerekse onun hocası Akşemseddin, Molla Gürani ve onunla
A primary motivation to capture
olmak hedefi idi.
Mehmet had the confidence of a brash 19-year-old. He banished the Janissaries who challenged his rule and demanded a pledge of loyalty from those who remained.